This might seem really out of the blue, but Spotify and Apple have actually been going at each other for the last 10 years. But it only just got very real. I mean, the things these two companies are saying to each other are brutal. It's like a really serious version of a rap battle. So what's going on? Also, this video is sponsored by CyberGhost VPN. 2008 is where the entire thing kicked off. It's when Apple introduced the App Store and Spotify became a thing. The way it worked is you could download the app for free, and then if you liked it, buy the premium version for €10 a month with an in-app purchase. And it kind of seems like everyone's a winner here. Spotify gets to put their app on the App Store, getting exposure to all of these new iPhone users. And then Apple gets this killer application that makes iPhones more desirable. The problems all kind of started when Apple decided to introduce a 30% fee for this in-app purchase. So that would mean that every time someone on the iOS Spotify app wanted to upgrade to premium, roughly €3 a month was going to Apple, and that's only the beginning. So understandably, Spotify's initial reaction was something like, no way, we're not paying 30%. If we pay 30%, we'll have no choice but to raise our prices, and we want to keep them low for our fans. Yeah, they call their paying customers fans, which is already a little weird. There was a bit of back and forth, but eventually Spotify accepted. And so because Apple was now taking this cut, Spotify raised its price to €13 a month. And its customers weren't happy, but it actually gets worse. Apple Music is at the center of all of this. And it's a very similar service to Spotify. You pay a monthly fee, you listen to unlimited music, but because Apple doesn't have to pay their own 30% fee, they managed to undercut Spotify and released at €10 a month, which made Spotify look unreasonable and greedy. So at this point, Spotify had kind of had enough. They pulled the plug. They said to Apple, we're not going to be a part of your in-app purchase scheme anymore. So they brought their prices back down to €10, but it meant two things. Customers could no longer upgrade to premium through the Spotify app, and Spotify was no longer allowed to freely communicate with their iOS users. Now, this is where it gets serious. Spotify launched a fully fledged ad campaign with an accompanying website titled Time to Play Fair. They're calling out Apple for misconduct and are accusing them of using their power to give them an unfair advantage. There are two sides to this story, and some people are actually saying that Spotify are the ones causing the problem, but let's hear them out first. If we head to this website they've made, Spotify claims 3 issues with what Apple is doing. Number 1, Apple denies consumers true choice. They add roadblocks to Spotify services, like not being able to email promotions and deals to their customers, when Apple Music is allowed to. Number 2, there's this 30% Apple tax for in-app purchases, which means that Spotify supposedly can't afford to offer the premium upgrade within their app. And the third issue is that Apple violates the law, apparently. Apple doesn't give Spotify a fair chance. You might know that with Google Assistant on Android phones, you can control Spotify directly with your voice. On Apple's Siri, you can't. And it actually got worse when Apple released their HomePod, arguably one of the best platforms for Spotify, because there was no original support for it. So this seems awful, and the fact that Spotify has made this entire PR campaign about it is a big deal. They are publicly attacking Apple. But then Apple clapped back, and you can tell they're not happy, but I'll let you decide whose side you're on here. So first of all, yes, Apple's 30% fee is a lot, bearing in mind that Spotify has to pay royalties to every single producer on the platform. Their profit margins are probably not as high as you'd think. But hey, let's rewind 10 years when people had to physically walk into a store to purchase software. The retailers that would put software on their shelves would often take as much as 50% of the money. That's their fee for providing the platform where customers can find that software. And when you think about it, the App Store is just the virtual equivalent. It's the platform that allows people to discover and download Spotify. And it kind of looks like Spotify wants to still take advantage of this, alongside Apple's software development tools, as well as their secure payment system, without paying a penny to Apple. It also turns out that Spotify completely didn't mention the fact that Apple's fee is only 30% for the first year, after which it falls to 15%, and the fact that the rules that are being applied to Spotify are the exact same as the ones being applied to other apps in the same category. Number 2 is that Spotify complained about Apple not supporting Spotify on Siri and HomePod. But Apple doesn't really support most third-party services. They're a company with a reputation for wanting to control the entire end-to-end experience. Now, I'm sure that in itself is upsetting to a lot of companies, but the fact that it doesn't only apply to Spotify means it's hard to prove that Apple is actively discriminating against them. And then, Apple, who you can tell they are mad at this situation, have pretty much outright accused Spotify of playing the victim to manipulate the consumer. On this Time to Play Fair website, Spotify is making themselves seem like the one being bullied, whereas Apple's words were, underneath the rhetoric, Spotify's aim is to make more money off others' work. And it's not just the App Store that they're trying to squeeze, it's also artists, musicians, and songwriters. They're referring to how Spotify recently tried to sue content creators who complained they weren't being paid enough. Yeah. Spotify also calls their customers fans, which in itself could be considered manipulative. By doing this, it's making it seem like these people need Spotify, and that Apple is some sort of villain for denying these poor fans the right to use Spotify. But in reality, they're paying customers, and if Spotify did increase the price, many of them would just switch to a different service and still be just as happy. So the whole situation is a mess. But which company would you side with? Okay, so you probably hear about a lot of different VPNs on the internet, and yeah, all the good ones accomplish the same goal of protecting your anonymity and preventing websites tracking your data when you don't want them to. Well, CyberGhost VPN offers all of this, but also a few interesting perks. First of all, when you get a subscription, you're allowed to have not one, not two, but 7 devices simultaneously using its services, so you could cover your entire family with one plan. There's also the fact that this service has one of the largest amount of servers, over 3,700 and counting, and because you're constantly connected to whichever is currently fastest, chances are you're going to have some reliable and impressive download speeds. They currently have a special offer on right now, and you can check out the link in the description below to find out more. There's also a 45-day money-back guarantee. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.